So our theme tonight is media as activism. And that is really about storytelling, like the transformative power of storytelling. And it's also about who's telling the stories and what stories you're telling. And all of our speakers tonight are giving a different lens onto that theme. And I would like to introduce you to our very first speaker. She's a storyteller, a journalist, a producer, and a filmmaker. Her writing is appearing in places such as Essence Magazine, Ebony, Glamour, and her film credits include Oasis, Bobby Kennedy for President, and Eyes on the Prize, Hallowed Ground. She is prolific and a native of East Oakland. Yes, emphasis on the East. Please welcome to the stage, Niema Jordan. Hello, hello, hello. How are you doing tonight, Niema?
I'm great. How are you? There we go.
Ooh, that sounds better.
Okay.
Amplification.
I should know how to do that.
Thank you for coming here today.
Thank you for having me.
How are you feeling?
Good, good. I'm excited. Like, the crowd looks good. Talked to some folks beforehand.
Yes.
Lots of really dope people here, so excited.
Yeah, and I know you told me earlier that normally this is reversed.
This is not what
Usually
I do.
you're interviewing, so I'm happy to
So I
switch
told
places.
them before, I was like, I ask the questions. So this whole like somebody else asking me questions, like I don't really know. But I'm here. I like to talk, so it works. But
We're gonna flip the script
it's
on you
usually,
tonight.
I should be asking you all things about your lives, but I'll sit back for a second.
We're happy to find out about you.
Yes.
So I know you got your start in journalism,
Yes.
and you also are a filmmaker.
Yes.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about how you decide what types of stories that you want to tell. Like, what stories do you gravitate to, thinking about, where you're from, you're a woman of color. How does that inform the type of stories that you want to tell?
I would say that when I'm looking at stories, I'm paying attention to what the personal connection is, right? You can tell when somebody isn't connected to a story or when they aren't connected to art, right? And specifically when you're looking at documentaries, it is so important that the person who is telling the story can tap in with the actual community that they are telling a story about, right? And engage in a particular way. And so, if someone approaches me about a story and I can tell, like, I don't really know too much about that topic, I don't really know too much about that community, I'm the first person to be like, well, maybe you should talk to somebody from the community and see if, they can tell this story, right? So I'm looking for stories that I'm personally connected to. Ones that I think that I can do justice in a certain type of way, but also stories that I think are going to make an impact, right? I think it is really important for us to be aware of the impact of our art, of our work, and so it's something that I take very seriously. So stories that have an impact.
East Oakland has a very specific voice,
Yes.
At least in my mind, and it sounds like yours. So to see that HBO, different platforms moving around, what is that not only doing for you, but, from other people that come from where you come from too? How do you see that impact leading?
So before you even get to the storytelling part of it, right? I think it's important for me to do the type of work that I'm doing and to be able to do it from home. And to do it from Oakland, right? Because I was taught growing up here that it was important for me to get out of Oakland, right? So from East Oakland, it's like, you're really smart, you're really creative, you need to get the hell out of here. You need to go somewhere else and be successful, et cetera, and so forth. I did it, right? I was like, all right, time to go off and go somewhere else. But I always think, like, what does it mean for younger generations to see somebody at home doing what they want to do, right? And then also, what does it mean to have a certain level of access and come back home and create opportunities, right? And so I think that there's impact just in that space of it. And then I think also with the stories, and being able to, I tell people all the time, y'all, Oakland influences everything. Everything. And so people will joke like, oh, like Niema's always gonna tell you she's from Oakland. Like, yeah, I am. And it'll be like, oh, Niema, what's the Oakland connection to this story? And I'm like, I'm glad you asked, because what you didn't know is, right? I'll give the example that I just finished working on the new version of the Eyes on the Prize series. And
Flex.
and it's the third installment of that series. But one of the episodes I worked on, they're doing all of this work. We're looking at footage in Chicago.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's Jazz Hudson. Oh, that's, like I'm naming folks, right? I'm like, this Oakland right here. Like when you talk about the culture, it's not just Black Panther Party. It's like, yes, like one you need to recognize, and you also need to recognize like the soil where all of that came from, right? And so there's going to be influence beyond what the sort of like mainstream understanding is. And so that is something I really love doing too, is like pointing out the Oakland and everything. It's really fun.
No, I love that. I also want to talk to you a little bit about your background in journalism.
Yes.
And but when you're an activist and you have something to say, like how do you combine those kind of very different approaches? Like how do you allow journalism and those ethos to inform your storytelling? And when do you say, hey, no, I need to put my perspective and where I'm from, I need to put that lens on this story?
Yeah. That's a long answer I have for you. But okay, I'm trying to figure out how to condense this, because we had a really long conversation about this before. In my journalistic training, right, I was taught to always be objective. But I don't think that's a real thing, right? Because everyone has a perspective. Everyone has a lens through which they're telling their stories, right? So even if you do the most basic, I'm going to get somebody for each talking point and somebody for each side, you still chose who you were going to talk to for those different things, right? So there was still a filtering process. There was still a selection process. So I think the first part of it is that we have to acknowledge our perspective, our bias, our filters when we're telling stories, right? The other thing is the medium in which I tell stories, right? So I have, most of my stories have been magazine writing, and then documentary film. Those spaces allow for more perspective when you're doing that type of reporting. At the same time, there are certain things that I won't go out and do because I need to be aware of my position as a journalist. It's like if I'm gonna tell a story and everyone see me, they're like, okay, Niema and Mani hang out all the time, and now she's writing a story about him. Clearly, this is a PR piece. This is content marketing. This is not journalism, right? And so you have to be aware, I have to be aware of how my everyday decisions factor into my work, right? And what the stories are that I'm gonna tell. So there's some maneuvering, right, that I have to do. But I think the main thing for me is just being very honest, right? If I have a position on something, I'm not gonna pretend that I don't have a position on it, right? Because I'm not gonna fake be objective. I'm gonna say, actually, I am Niema Jordan. I'm from East Oakland. This is my perspective on this, and this is the lens that you're getting the story from. And I think that's really important because you want to tell people the truth. That's what you're supposed to be doing in this media space. So, yeah. Sorry.
But this is how it works, right? Your friends you get to marvel over, and then create a space in which you can highlight how amazing they are. And we're sitting here where you just dropping, eyes on the prize. Stop flexing like that. But also, can you speak about more projects you've worked on that people may have seen and didn't know it was you?
Yes. I'm like, where do I? So a couple of years ago, it's a couple of years now. So I worked on a series called The Me You Can't See. That's the largest project that I've worked on so far. It was a 6-part series for Apple TV, and dealing with mental health. It's Oprah and Prince Harry that's the show. So it's like, that's the thing where it's like, okay, the Oprah and Prince Harry show, we'll get into some of that later. But that was a really big project for me for a lot of reasons. But one, because like I had started working full time in the marketing department at a tech company, because I was like, this artist stuff is like,
it's stressful, huh?
I'm so tired of hustling. Give me a different job, right? So I went and did it. I was like, all right, cool. I'm in here. I'm about to make some tech money and then like invest in some friends' projects. Like that was my goal. I was really ready. And then I got a call that was like, will you leave your job to work on this documentary series? And I was like, this shit is so reckless. Yes, I will do it, right? And so it was a big leap for me. But a leap that I'm really, really glad that I took. And I would say more recently, a project that's really dear to me is I produced a short film called Breeway, Promise, Witness, Remembrance, and it's about the artwork around Breonna Taylor. And that piece, not just like being like, okay, here I have this 30-minute documentary, but spending time in Louisville, seeing the people who are doing the work day to day, connecting with her mom and her sister, and talking to the people who really knew her. I think that is something that had a real impact on me, and it's definitely something that I'm not gonna forget. So those are like the most recent pieces.
So when we spoke before, you told me about that project and how you were able to develop a relationship with Breonna Taylor's mother. Mm-hmm. And that brought up this topic about like how documentary filmmaking can be very exploitive, very extractive, right? Mm-hmm. So could you talk a little bit about how you navigate with, you got HBO on one side or whoever's paying the bills to do the project, who wants it quick, who wants it within a certain time frame, but then there's also that human element where you don't want to just drop in these people's lives, take some notes, tell their story, and then bounce. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about how you kind of navigate that?
Yes, it's a hard last question because that's like more than a 15-minute answer too. But so here's what I'll say. Like for producers, our job is really building relationships and then making sure like whatever the thing is gets done, right? The director has a vision. You have to make sure that whatever is going on, you can make that thing happen, right? So a lot of that is relationship building. You will talk to people and you will see how some folks move, and it's very extractive, right? It's like kind of how like people don't like the word networking because it feels like very like producing is like that too. You're like, ooh, you're just going in and trying to get something from somebody, and then that's the end of it, right? And I think for me, I'm always just very much aware that we are dealing with people. A lot of times executives forget that. They're thinking stories, they're thinking deadlines, they're thinking bottom line. And I'm the person on the ground. And so sometimes being in a space where I'm not operating in an extractive mode means that I'm doing some things that could put my job at risk. Because it might mean, pushing against somebody or their deadline or whatever they're asking for, or saying, actually, the thing that you want me to ask this person for is really fucking inappropriate, right? And you have to be able to do that, right? So there's that space of it. And I think, documentary film, it's like anthropology. It's like I also have studied public health, like, you have all of these spaces where it's about going into a community, extracting their story, studying them, and then giving it to the masses and never going back, right? And so for me, part of the reason I like to tell stories that reflect my community is because I'm in there, right? I'm not leaving. So like, how do I tell stories that are connected? And then also, in whatever ways I can, empowering folks. Like I tell people all the time, like I have things I want to ask you, but what is the story that you want to tell, right? Because that's a thing that people don't ask. Like I know what I want to write about you. No. What is the message that you want to get out, right? And so bringing it back to even to Breeway, it's like talking to the family. It's like, okay, what do you want people to know about your daughter, right? What what is the thing that media misses? What is the thing that social media misses, right? Like all these people are attached to her as a hashtag, right? But like, what does it mean to be really connected and really know and understand her? And those are the kinds of questions. And then honestly, when the process is over, like you can't just dip. You gotta know what's going on. Like I know folks' birthdays. I don't just know your birthday when I'm filming, right? So it's those sort of things. Like I think of it as building long-term relationships, and I think it's really important.
Niema Jordan, everybody, thank you.
Wait. A proper send-off for this superstar. Y'all shake our hand, take a picture.
Thank you.
Niema Jordan, everyone, y'all.
Thank you.